talk to a university, they think, well, the idea is what's valuable. No, the execution is what's valuable, like a 5,000x return. So one investment like that can almost make a VC's career. Hide things? Well, you won't be able to hide things anymore. So let's see, I started my career here after going to graduate school at Stanford in business. I had studied economics at Harvard. Maybe you have heard of Larry Summers. He was a Treasury Secretary in the US, so I was a programmer for him when he was a graduate student. So I did my undergrad there, came here, and I met my wife in my business school class, and she convinced me that we should be doing tech because we were in Silicon Valley and we shouldn't leave California after graduating. So we got married, and in fact, I took her very good advice. And so we both started working for a technology company, she for Hewlett-Packard, and then I worked for a small company at the time called Quantum, which was making disk drives and tape drives that go into personal computers. This was before we had laptops. So think back in the 1980s, it was the time when IBM introduced the first PC. You guys are way too young to remember that, but that was kind of the real boom of the consumer, computer era. So I worked there for almost 30 years and became the CEO of the company. Kind of unusual to start as a product manager at a business school and stay long enough to lead the company. And the company grew during that time. Always great to be at a company that's growing for your career. The company grew from 40 million in sales to $6 billion in sales over that time period. So I had the good fortune to lead the company as a CEO for about 6 years. And then after that, decided that I wanted to take a break. It was a pretty, intense, as all CEO jobs are. And Quantum was large enough to have both global manufacturing and customers around the world. So a lot of travel. Some of you from Italy, it sounds like. Is that right? Yeah. So a lot of trips to when they used to make computers.
Yeah, he's also one of the mentors of the fellowship. That he's the founder of Logitech. But before he was working at Olivetti.
Oh yeah. Ivrea. Anyone been to Ivrea?
Yeah.
And Scarmagno, some little towns that are in the Aosta Valley. Beautiful. So, big customers for us were Compaq at the time before HP bought them, IBM, Apple.
He's like another mentor that was at Olivetti. Then he did like Fairchild, the semiconductor, Intel. And I think he's like the inventor of the microprocessor. There is also like his name at the Silicon Valley Museum.
Really?
Yeah, Obama also gave him like the Medal of Freedom.
Oh, beautiful. Like yeah. At the Computer History Museum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So after that, I decided to start working with some smaller companies, doing some board work. One of those was Veritas, which was a storage software company. They ended up merging along the way with Symantec. So during that time period, I was on the board at Symantec, and then turned out about 8 years later, the company decided to fire the CEO. The CEO gave an ultimatum to the board of directors. That's never a good idea if you're the CEO, because the board can fire you, and in this case, that's what the board did. So then they turned to me. I was on the board and had run a public company, lived in the area, knew the business. So then I was the CEO at Symantec for a couple of years. Then my career turned, we'd say a complete left turn, as I was thinking about what to do next, and also looking for another different type of role. Having led a large company, Symantec was it was the 10th largest software company at the time, $6 billion in revenue, storage management, sales, software, and security software. Probably best known for the Norton brand. If anyone uses Norton antivirus, Norton LifeLock, so those are some of the brand names. And so at that time, I met my now partner here at Shield Capital. His name is Raj Shah. There's a picture of him on the far back left wall flying an F-16. He's a very cool guy, much cooler than me. And he had spent his career in the Air Force, obviously, from the picture, and as a fighter pilot, but also an entrepreneur here in Silicon Valley. So he had led a successful cybersecurity startup called Morta that got sold to Palo Alto Networks, which is one of the big cybersecurity firms here in the Valley. And he got tapped by our Secretary of Defense at the time, this is 2016, Ash Carter. And Ash Carter asked him to lead something that was very much a new idea at the time. It was called the Defense Innovation Unit. And that group was really formed to bring more commercial technology into the US military. So what Ash Carter had observed, maybe as early as 2010, maybe a little bit before that, was that while Silicon Valley is actually a product of investment from the US Defense Department, the semiconductor industry itself, Fairchild, Intel, all of those companies got early contracts from the US government for chips. In the 1960s, about 1/3 of the semiconductor output for the entire industry was sold to the US government, part for the Apollo space program to get men on the moon, and also for miniaturizing the electronics that go into nuclear warheads. So needed miniature electronics for both of those. Huge customer, early adopter. But as the tech industry moved on, that became the basis, well, not only for the name Silicon Valley, but also the basis for microprocessors being produced in such volume and low cost that it became used in every product that we know, right? It's used in dishwashers and automobiles. And so as that happened, Silicon Valley migrated away from defense. It's not that there was a period when there was no defense happening, but the big volumes, big money to be made was in other products, especially consumer products. Nobody probably embodies that more than Apple. So Ash Carter said, gee, a lot of what the military is going to need as we go forward is going to be some of the things that Silicon Valley and the other innovation hubs are producing. AI, autonomy, cyber, space. We're going to need that technology. And it's not being developed by what we call defense primes or the companies that focus on defense, names like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. So we're going to need to redevelop relationships. That's why he formed Defense Innovation Unit. He did that at a speech, pretty famous speech at Stanford in 2015. Raj was the first director, Raj Shah, of that. So he recruited me as I was leaving Symantec in 2016, and I worked there for 6 years. How do we look to commercial solutions for the hard military problems we might have? Shield Capital is investing in companies that hope to be selling to the military, and our investment idea is that those companies are going to be more successful if they were what we call dual use, meaning they sell to commercial customers, not just the military. So AI would be a perfect example. Most AI companies don't need to sell to the Defense Department. They pursue much bigger markets that are outside defense. But it'd be nicer to have more markets, more customer stability, and that will help them clearly when they're thinking about some exit. So we're a venture capital firm that is what we say early stage. So it's investing in first or second check into the company. We write checks that would be 1 to 10 million. But then the companies, if we're successful, grow in their value. So some of the most successful companies we've invested in now have, billion-dollar valuations. Maybe since we have pictures on the wall, just give you some quick examples. This company, Elroy Air, makes this product. It's what we call electric vertical takeoff and landing. So it takes off like this, like a Harrier jet, doesn't need a long runway. And it's battery powered for the takeoff, and then it has a gas engine to take you long distances. So it can take 300 pounds, 300 miles without a pilot. So think about that as being very important for logistics operations. Here's another autonomy company. We invest in 4 areas: AI, autonomy, cyber, and space. Autonomy, this is a company called Sea Satellite. So they make this small boat. It's about 10 feet in length, solar powered. The key differentiators for it are it's very low cost, so $200,000 for one of these boats. Most autonomous boats are millions of dollars, and it will completely right itself in rough seas. So most autonomous boats capsize. A lot of boats would capsize if you went through a typhoon or hurricane. This can completely rotate 360 degrees and come up and keep going. So it's pretty amazing in terms of its resilience. Just won a big $90 million contract with the Marines. Another company, Apex, does something called a satellite bus. What is that? That allows you to design to go on a standard fixture if I'm going on a SpaceX rocket. So rather than every company who wants to send something into space having to do its own design work for how do I fit in the SpaceX rocket, Apex actually provides a standard fixture. It's called a bus for satellites. So just like all of us as passengers getting on a bus that's going somewhere, that's kind of the idea behind satellite bus. It was the fastest company to go from a clean sheet of paper to getting something in space. They did that in 13 months. And here's a picture of the Apex satellite in space. Another satellite company, Albedo, this is actually doing the satellites themselves. So this is doing a combination of optical and infrared. So what's the value of that? I can see a runway and the infrared tells me if it's hot. So has something happened at that area? Or I could do the same with a Walmart parking lot. If I'm a hedge fund and I want to see how well Walmart's doing, I could take a look at that. And then another one here, Armada. This is a company, I don't know how well you can see it from there, but it's a data center in a shipping container. So like a shipping container you see on big cargo ships, a data center's here and it connects to Starlink. So I could put a data center, here's a picture in the Arctic or Antarctic. I could put it on a ship. I could put it where an oil and gas field is in a desert. Anywhere that's a remote location that I could have a data center that I wouldn't have had that before. So those are some of the kind of things that we invest in. Okay, why don't I stop there and see where we should go from there.
How important do you think that going to Harvard, Stanford, was for you to be success?
I mean, it's hard to really know, isn't it? But you do get to meet it's a couple things. Peer group, so it's a very fun group. I mean, I met my wife in my Stanford class. Some of my friends are still folks I got to know. So that's one factor. And the other thing is something economists call market signaling, which is going to be intuitive to you. They both are screens, meaning not everyone who applies gets in. So other places you want to be affiliated with are using that as a measure of how some kind of accomplishment, right? So yeah. So I think it's a factor, but I would say I don't think it's as big a factor as your individual characteristics, like your drive, your grit. I think those are much more important than where you went to school. I also find in the East Coast of the United States, there's much more interest and emphasis on where did you go to school than there is here on the West Coast. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, when you're like signing a deal and when you're like investing in a company, do you guys include like some sort of like warrant and options to have like more control of the company or buy it cheaper in the future? Is that something that
Well, interesting question. So I wouldn't say that's a standard tool that we use. So our philosophy on investing, and you're going to find this with all VCs. Do you guys know how venture works? Have you had kind of okay, good.
Yeah.
Who'd you meet with Lightspeed?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'm working with a number of folks there. The whole idea in venture capital, of course, is to pick some companies that are going to be winners, and you're not going to make all great picks. In fact, there's a great book if you want to learn about venture capital. I'd highly recommend called The Power Law. It's written by a guy named Sebastian Mallaby, Mallaby. And the Power Law is basically how venture firms think about their portfolio, because we're trying to make money for investors. And the idea is one outsized success makes up for many mistakes. So an example would be if you can have one firm that returns 100x, that's going to make up for 10 firms that you invested in that didn't do anything. And the kind of rule of thumb is that if you have 10 companies, you're lucky if one does really, really well, may not get to 100, maybe it has 50 times return. And a couple, 2 or 3 are going to do okay. Maybe we would call that a double. Maybe you would get more than your money back. And a lot of them you're going to lose your investment. So you're trying to make sure that you pick the ones that can take off like a rocket. I think Peter Thiel's investment in Facebook, as an example, I'm going to get the number wrong, but he made something like a 5,000x return. So one investment like that can almost make a VC's career. So
It's crazy, right? think he sold his position like after IPO. And
Yeah, and he maybe could have made a lot more since then. But it doesn't matter what you didn't make; it matters what you did make. So the whole idea behind venture investing is find those winners and invest early. So we're investing at the very earliest stages, seed and Series A, even though the names don't mean as much now, because in that world of AI, some seed investments are 100 million, a couple hundred million. So it's a little bit inflated in this period from what it used to be. Seeds used to be $1 million, $2 million, actually something just to get the company going. So back to your question. So it's less important for us to get warrants in a company as it is to, number one, pick the right company, and early. We want as much stake early on as possible. So our goal is to get 15, 20, 25% of a company in its very earliest stage. So I led a seed investment on a company we have 25% of. It had a valuation of 20 million when we made it, and now it could have 100 million. So then having that big stake as the valuations go up is what drives the whole venture business. Yeah.
I wanted to ask what you studied in your undergraduate degree at Harvard, and you said your wife was the one after Stanford, like she was the one who suggested you to get into tech. Like, since I don't know what you studied, whether it was technical.
It wasn't. Economics. Studied economics.
Okay, yeah, so great.
Yeah.
So my question is, how difficult or how important was it, and how difficult was it to get into tech without being without having like a computer science degree or background?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's kind of two ways that I would say to enter tech. One would be you are an engineer and you are developing products. That wasn't going to be me. The other way is kind of through the marketing or go-to-market, as it's called, which would be marketing or sales. There, you just happen to have an interest in the products. You need to not be afraid of understanding how they work from a technology standpoint, but you're not designing the product. So that's the way I entered. So I started as a market analyst, just understanding what the market was in the disk drive world, and then learned to be a product manager, and then eventually VP of marketing at the company Quantum that I mentioned that did. So I think it's important to think about the functions that are most critical to a company when you make a choice to go there. For example, if you want to be a successful person in finance, if you want to run a bank, you probably need to be pretty successful at finance, right? If you want to run a tech company, it's either I need to be an engineer and be thinking of the products. That's what Steve Jobs did, right? Or I can come in through the marketing side and kind of understand what the market wants. If I want to run Procter & Gamble, I better understand marketing. So I think it's important to think about what are the functions that are critical to the company depending on where it sits. Yeah, yeah. There's enough satellites that we can see things change frequently. It's called revisit rates, as you know, and multiple sensors. So optical, we naturally think of, what am I seeing? But infrared, radio frequency, something called synthetic aperture radar. How do I radar image from space? So I can see through clouds, I can see at night. All of these different, what we call modalities, you can be able to see all those different sensor types, real time, anywhere on the globe. And if you think about where we've been in space, it's been so expensive to get the sensors in space that I wouldn't have had enough to revisit very much. So I might have seen a space on the Earth, like over North Korea, twice a day, maybe. And they knew we were coming, so they could hide things. Well, you won't be able to hide things anymore. And I couldn't see before at night. I couldn't see through clouds. I could only see when, optically I could see something. And there were places on the globe that were completely dark. The Indian Ocean, the Pacific. There weren't satellites focused on those areas. So, yeah, it's an area that's just, people talk about AI. Yeah, that's changing everything. But space and what's possible from space is exploding. It's this fascinating area. Our view is, well, they're not that serious. Yeah. I had an idea for $1 billion business too, but if you haven't pursued or done anything with it, ideas in some sense are cheap. People think the idea is everything. You talk to a university, they think, well, the idea is what's valuable. No, the execution is what's valuable. Lots of people have ideas, assembling the team that can make something happen and actually going to talk to customers and getting that feedback. And that's what's valuable. That's what's worth paying for from a venture investor. And then the third would be actually getting the feedback. So if a customer is willing to pay something for it, pilot is one thing, but actually getting to, yeah, that's valuable, we're willing to pay as a customer, that's hugely valuable. Yeah. So we call that product market fit, right? Have I got something that the market really wants to buy? Otherwise, just an idea. Not that ideas are bad, it's just that it's not that valuable if I don't have a team that can execute and I've got customer feedback and customers actually willing to pay for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Like how much speed matters.
Speed matters, but how compelling the idea is matters more. And if you can develop an idea that creates what we call a moat, some competitive differentiation, which is tougher for competitors, that's more valuable. So if you could do, you thought up an idea last night and you bring it to us, we all know, you included, that, well, if you did it last night, probably others can do it too, right? So that makes it less valuable. Unless it's something that you could build a moat around. One way people do that is patents, obviously, but most tech companies are protected not by patents, but how fast can they move in the marketplace. So again, speed matters in terms of how fast can I execute, how fast can I react to what's happening in the market.
But also quality too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. The number of companies we've seen that have a new idea for guardrails for AI would, you would roll your eyes. I mean, probably not a week goes by that we don't get another pitch for someone, okay, it's probably needed technology, but now it's a pretty obvious idea and there's so much competition. So pretty hard for somebody to differentiate. Yeah.
So if you don't have a competition or it's pretty new, so it makes it even more complex. Is that more appealing or less appealing because it's riskier, more complex, time consuming, but that's also some kind of niche or new direction?
Yeah, it's hard to make a general statement. So what we would look at is the same three things. How good is the team? Are they going to get market feedback and be able to incorporate that and make changes as they do? That's why customer feedback is so important. Does the team know something about the space? Maybe they've been the ultimate end customer. Maybe they've been in that industry for a good part of their career. Those are the kind of things that we would look at. And references. We would talk to everybody you've ever worked with. Your boss as a summer intern, your professor. We'll talk to as many people as possible to get a picture of who you are as an entrepreneur. And then it's back to the tech. How challenging is the tech? We've done some things that are pretty technically difficult if you think about those investments that we've made, but nothing was invention required. So what we're looking for on technology is if you put in the engineering effort, can you get there? Because all of the key, what would we call them, uncertainties about whether it can be done or not are resolved. So it's just a matter of doing the engineering. If you say, I'm trying to do something like fusion, and I don't really know how I'm going to get there, I need some invention, which is where fusion is, then we're going to shy away because that's too risky. But it's not a venture business. So I'll give you an example of a venture business. So we invested in a company, it's called Code Metal. They're using generative AI to do code translation, not development with Claude, but I've already developed a code base, and now I need to translate it to something else. And if I can do that automatically, that's very valuable in the business world. And what we call super horizontal. So many companies could need that. They've already won a $100 million contract with the Air Force. They're talking to Bosch, Raytheon, L3Harris, Qualcomm, Toyota. So every venture firm is looking for businesses like that look like they're going to scale to a big degree. That's why these AI companies are so successful, right? They're already proving to getting from 0 to 100 million in revenue faster than anyone's ever done before. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming.